Good morning everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the topic colonial rule and pastoral life. With this topic a question arises, how did colonial rule impact the lives of pastoral communities in terms of changes in grazing grounds, movement restrictions, agricultural stock decline, and adverse effects on trades and crafts? To answer this question there are 4 reasons that we will discuss step by step. First, during the colonial period, the state aimed to convert grazing lands into cultivated farms to bolster its finances, as land revenue was a key income source. This expansion would raise revenue and yield crops like jute, cotton, and wheat for England. The colonial view was that uncultivated land was unproductive, lacking in revenue and agricultural output, thus needing cultivation. Waste land rules, enacted from the mid-1800s, facilitated this process. They allowed uncultivated lands to be taken over and allocated to chosen individuals who received concessions and were encouraged to settle there. Some became village headmen in these newly cleared zones. However, these areas often served as grazing tracts for pastoralists. Thus, promoting cultivation led to the depletion of pastures, presenting a challenge for pastoralist communities. Second, by the mid-19th century, forest acts were introduced in various provinces, leading to the declaration of some forests as reserved for valuable timber like deodar or sal. Pastoralists lost access to these forests, while in other protected forests, limited grazing rights were granted, but movement was restricted due to concerns about tree saplings being damaged. These acts significantly impacted pastoralists, as they were no longer allowed in forests that once provided forage for the cattle. Even in permissible areas, their movements were regulated with permits that dictated entry and exit timings and duration of stay. This shift severely disrupted the traditional way of life, as they had to abide by forest department rules and risked fines if they exceeded permitted stay times. Third, British officials during colonial times viewed nomadic individuals with suspicion, distrusting traders, craftsmen, and pastoralists who frequently changed locations. The colonial government aimed to govern a settled population residing in fixed villages with designated fields, as it was easier to identify and control. Settled people were deemed law-abiding, while nomads were labeled as criminals. In 1871, the Colonial Tribes Act was passed in India, categorizing various communities, including craftsmen, traders, and pastoralists, as inherently criminal. This act confined them to designated village settlements requiring permits for movement. These individuals were closely monitored by village police to maintain control. The act reflected the British authorities' attempt to regulate and restrict the mobility of these communities to enforce their idea of social order. Fourth, to expand the revenue income, the colonial government aimed to boost revenue by imposing taxes on various sources, including land, canal water, salt, trade goods, and animals. Pastoralists were heavily taxed on grazing animals, with taxes escalating and collection efficiency improving over time. From the 1850s to the 1880s, tax collection was auctioned to contractors, who charged high taxes to recoup the payments to the state and maximize profits. Later, the government directly collected taxes from pastoralists, providing them passes for entry into grazing areas. Each pass noted the cattle count and tax paid. This taxation strategy evolved over time, reflecting the government's strive to increase income while affecting the lives of pastoralists in India during the colonial period. Now let's discuss how these changes affected the lives of pastoralists and how they coped with these changes. The colonial taxation measures caused a shortage of pastures as grazing lands were converted to cultivated fields and forests were reserved, restricting cattle herding. The reduction in pastureland led to intensified grazing, impacting the quality of remaining pastures. Nomadic pastoralists' movements helped restore vegetation, but restrictions led to continuous use and declining quality. This worsened forage scarcity, causing underfed cattle and significant deaths during scarcities and famines. The colonial taxation led pastoralists to adapt in various ways, reducing herd sizes due to pasture shortage, finding new grazing areas when movement was restricted, and some transitioning to settled life or trading. After 1947, political boundaries prevented movements, prompting shifts like Rakers moving to Haryana for sheep grazing. Richer pastoralists settled, while poorer ones borrowed, sometimes becoming laborers. Despite challenges, pastoralists grew in number by altering movement, herd size, and income sources. Pastoralism remained ecologically viable in dry regions and mountains. These changes weren't unique to India. Globally, laws and settlements caused similar adjustments for pastoral communities. In conclusion, colonial rule had a profound impact on pastoral life, presenting numerous challenges for these communities. However, pastoralists exhibited remarkable resilience, adapting their ways of living to cope with changing circumstances. As we reflect on history, let us acknowledge the contributions of pastoralists to our cultural diversity and understand the importance of supporting their rights and traditional practices in the present day. Thank you.